This video will cover one of the world's greatest red wines. I'll focus on a wine that doesn't get quite the attention of places like Bordeaux, Burgundy, Piemonte, or Tuscany. After a long look through my cellar, I decided on COTE ROTIE from the Northern Rhone. For me, this is the greatest expression of Syrah. I'll discuss the region, the grape varieties, the wines, what to look for in today's market, along with tips to get the most out of your old bottles of wine. Then I'll open a 25-year-old bottle from a classic producer. Thank you for clicking on this video. I'm Bob Paulinski, Master of Wine. I've spent more than 40 years in the wine trade, a good part of that traveling to all regions of the world, exploring wine, and the Northern Rhone is right at the very top of my list. The Rhone Valley is in the southeast part of France. The Northern Rhone is just a short drive outside of the city of Lyon. As you head south, COTE ROTIE will be the first appellation that's encountered along the way. COTE ROTIE means roasted slope. Many of the vineyards have a south or southeast exposure for extended sunlight hours. Steep vineyards are quite common. Sometimes the gradient can reach 60%. The soils tend to be quite rocky, generally made up of schist and granite soils. Any moisture that occurs tends to drain away quickly, and the soil is actually quite infertile. This is a factor in limiting yields and improving quality. Well, 95% of what's produced in the Rhone Valley is from the southern regions. COTE ROTIE up in the north, it's a small appellation. It's only about 500 acres under vine. It includes around 130 individual growers. What that means is there's a high number of very small parcels of vineyard land, with most of the labor being done by hand. The Northern Rhone is a continental climate, the Southern Rhone much more of a Mediterranean climate. Now, specific to COTE ROTIE, if you go back some decades to the 1960s, this was not the heyday for COTE ROTIE. Many of the vineyards there were not being tended to because the land was just too difficult to work. It wasn't into the 1970s and then into the 1980s when there was truly a renaissance for COTE ROTIE. A good number of growers sell their fruit to Guigal, the primary wine producer in the region. More recently, smaller growers are starting to produce under their own labels, sometimes in very limited lots of a couple of hundred cases or even less. COTE ROTIE is made entirely from or predominantly from Syrah. The reality is some of the wines are 100% Syrah, others contain a bit of Viognier, typically around 5%. The rule allows for Viognier to be used up to 20% of the final wine, but it must be co-fermented with Syrah and not blended after fermentation. That said, it would be very rare for anyone to use 20% Viognier. The truth of the matter is, in some cases, Syrah and Viognier are interplanted within the same vineyard. There's really no practical way to separate the two without incurring considerable added expense. Now, if Viognier is used with a skilled hand, it can help to lift the aromatics and it makes the wine a little more rounder and more polished. If it's used in a way where things go sideways, you can have problems with dilution, and it can also negatively affect the acidity of the wine. Many COTE ROTIE will indicate a more specific place of origin. The most common are Côte Brune and Côte Blonde. Each produces a somewhat different style of COTE ROTIE. The former is from a site that brings deeper, denser, slightly more tannic style COTE ROTIE. The latter has a different soil structure that brings a softer, a bit lighter style. Beyond that, even more site-specific indicators have become increasingly common. The wine that I'll be opening is a 1998 Mathilde and Yves Gangloff COTE ROTIE La Barberine. In 1987, just before the harvest, the negociant that they were contracted with went bankrupt. From that point forward, they began producing their own wine. As for the current vintage, the pricing runs approximately $275 to $300 per bottle. As for the one that I'm opening here, it's a rarity, and price quotes tend to be broadly spread, but I did find a quote that topped out at a bit over $400 per bottle. Originally, I paid $40 for this wine back in the early 2000s. With older bottles, special care is needed in order to maximize the wine's full potential. Stand the bottle upright for a day or two. This will allow any sediment to work its way down into the base of the bottle, therefore reduces the risk of it ending up in your wine glass. Check the fill level. As the wine ages, generally the fill level will drop a bit. Ideally, it should be no more than a finger width from the base of the cork to the point where the wine tops out in the bottle. This one is perfect. The gap is maybe a quarter of an inch. Check the condition of the cork. There should be no signs of leaking. Also, shine a bright light up into the base of the bottle. It'll allow you to have clean line of sight to any sediment that could be in the wine. This one has very little, therefore I won't be decanting it. If the cork feels a bit soft or spongy, which is very common with older bottles, use the two-prong or so-called ASO cork puller. This one feels sound, but just to play it safe, I'll use the two-prong. Before I taste the wine, just a bit more about the producer. As far as I can tell, they don't have a website. I think that's kind of cool. They're old vines, low yields. They're using organic viticulture and native yeast. And there is some oak used in the wines for Gangloff, but not heavy oak. Also, as is the case with many producers in that part of the Rhone, they have vineyards in multiple appellations. In the case of Gangloff, they also have vineyards in CONDRIEU and Saint Joseph. In terms of appearance, this wine looks very healthy for one that's 25 years old. The core is relatively deep. There is some fade as you look out to the edge of the glass, but there's not much in the way of browning, which is a telltale sign that the wine has crested the hill. All things considered, this wine looks to be in very good condition. My initial taste of this wine is after it's been open for only about 10 minutes. Serious wow factor on the aromatics. I mean, it smells incredible. It has this charcuterie characteristic to it. And if you've had some Northern Rhone wines before, you may know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's something very cool, even though it may sound quite strange. There's a peppery characteristic, a bit of an Asian five-spice note to it. There's some black fruit to the wine as well. And even though it's 25 years old, it still does show some fruit character. Certainly there's some tertiary notes in the wine as well, but it's absolutely not falling apart based on the aromatics. On the palate, love this wine. It's very round, soft, good length to it. It ticks all the boxes for a wine that has fantastic balance. There is this smoky spice pepper character to it, which is really cool, but the finish goes on and on. I think this wine may have actually been at its peak a few years ago, but it's holding together just fine. It's not showing any signs of really being over the hill. I think maybe it's right at the crest at the time, or maybe just slightly beyond, but it's drinking absolutely beautiful. This is a good indicator of what you can have in your cellar. If you pick and choose the right COTE roties, store them in the right conditions, you're going to be rewarded so many times over when you get around to actually trying the wines. So I'm back after about 3 hours, and if anything, the aroma on this wine has intensified. This is just drinking incredibly well. I'd say this is one of the best bottles of wine I've had in all of 2023. Posted in the description below, I'll include the names and vintages of COTE ROTIE to search out. I understand the wines are pricey, many will be north of $100, but if you're looking for some blue chip wines to cellar away, these are the absolute perfect candidate. If you're looking for some lesser expensive wines from the Northern Rhone that bring fantastic character and some of the qualities that you'll find in COTE ROTIE, I'll list them in the description as well. As always, I thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. Your support is very much appreciated. I hope you're drinking well tonight. I think I'm doing okay, and until next time, cheers.